Good morning, Matt Ferentz. Monday mornings with Matt. Good to see you this morning. It is October 19th, if we can believe it. Make sure I have this music paused so it doesn't come back through. So it's October 19th, and we are 2 weeks and 1 day away from the election, which is, again, hard to believe. Important day today. It is the voter registration deadline. So check in with all the people you know who are likely voters, who maybe aren't registered to vote, or if you know some people that recently moved to the area or are students attending school in the area, they have until the end of the day today to be registered to vote here in Crawford and Erie County and have a voice in this race. That's showing up. And that's what I want to talk about today, is showing up. So let's get to the screen here. So that's the idea. The first thing, of course, is that idea that what we need to do most of all is show up at the polls. And this year, we need to show up at the polls in a big, major way across all of the races to make sure that there aren't any shenanigans after the fact. But tonight also, in thinking about showing up, there's an event that if you happen to be part of the community of Allegheny College, you would know about. It's actually for the Allegheny students primarily, but it's the Allegheny Center for Political Participation Forum, candidate forum, something that they do all the time when there are these big elections, and something that candidates show up for so they can talk to the people of the area about their ideas. And what you may know already is that Brad Roy is not showing up for that tonight. Yeah, he was never planning to show up, in my opinion, and he came up with pretty much a BS reason why he wasn't going to show up, but he's not there. And that's what we need to talk about, is who does a candidate show up for and who does a candidate not show up for? So the message when you don't show up for Allegheny College is that you don't think that you represent Allegheny College, even though that is a central piece of the economic, cultural, and community foundation of the 6th Legislative District. Allegheny is a very important piece of the puzzle, but Brad Roy has made it clear that he does not show up for them. And in the past week, he also did not show up for Edinboro University. Edinboro University is just outside of the boundaries of the 6th Legislative District itself, but many people who are in the 6th work at Edinboro, and many of the students at our local high schools go to Edinboro after they graduate. It's the top destination for Crawford County high school graduates. And there was a vote on the Board of Governors, which Brad Roy happens to sit on, about merging Edinboro with Clarion and California University of PA, which is 150 miles down the pike. And he voted for that merger. Even though he's there and in the room, that rare opportunity you have to stick up for something in your district, and he did not show up for the district. And so, I want to think about what it means to be a legislator, and this is going to be some pretty significant art here. Here we go. Here's a legislator, stick figure legislator. And the question is, when you've got people over here who are struggling, how about a lot of them? How about when we talk about, say, the 1 in 4 people in Meadville who live in poverty? Do you show up over there and use the power that you have, the voice that you have, for example, as a member of the Board of Governors, or do you actually show up for that giant in the background who funds you, right? Who should you be as a legislator? And I think that the job of the legislator is to show up for this. And I fear too many legislators and politicians show up over here. So when we think about what evidence do we have for who our legislator shows up for, one of them are campaign contribution records. And these are public, and they're actually very easy to find. You can go directly to the Pennsylvania Department of State. You can just Google it, PA campaign finance, and you can search for all of the campaign finance reports for any candidates, including me, and you can see who they have been receiving donations from and where they're spending their money. There's also several other websites that are aggregating that public information. But if you go to the Pennsylvania Department of State, you can get the facsimile, the PDF version of the actual documents that we have to provide. And in fact, today, October 19th, is the last day of one of the campaign finance reporting deadlines. And so I have to gather all of the contributions since June 23rd, all of the expenses since June 23rd, and submit them by the end of the week to the state so they can be made public. So you can go to those campaign contribution records and see who's showing up for a candidate and what that might mean. And what we can see are PAC contributions. So PAC being political action committees. And what we had in 2019 with Brad, $34,000 were donated from PACs. And these were primarily energy PACs and insurance PACs and some other special interest sorts of PACs. And what that tells us is something about who a legislator is going to show up for. Another thing we need to think about is a group called ALEC. And I've been getting emails from this group called ALEC, and it's the American Legislative Exchange Council. Forgot what that C was for a second. And this is a conservative group that's work is actually literally to write model legislation that they then share with their members to, if I were on screen, I'd give you the scare quotes here, to help them write their own legislation. But what we see often is that there's similar legislation that's coming up in lots of different state legislatures because it's coming straight from ALEC, which suggests that a candidate who's showing up for ALEC isn't actually thinking about the 1 in 4 people in Meadville in poverty or the broad needs of a region, but actually is looking at those talking points. And you can map a lot of the talking points we see with our incumbent to ALEC, this American Legislative Exchange Council. We can also think about what is the candidate, or in this case, the elected official, proud to be endorsed by. And one of them last week was really interesting to me. It was kind of a funny one in lots of ways. It was a statement of 100% rating from the Americans for Prosperity group. So 100%. This is, just to be clear, Brad has 100%. And what was funny about this post is, first of all, bragging about that, which I'll get to in a second, but listing all of the other Democratic elected officials and their ratings with the Americans for Prosperity Special Interest Group. And then at the end, throwing me in there just as well. Of course, he'd be the same for the rest of them. I'm, of course, not rated by Americans for Prosperity at all because I'm not a legislator. I'm sure my rating would not be high, to be clear, because the Americans for Prosperity is a Koch brothers, and that might be all you need to know if you're paying attention to big money in politics. It's a Koch brothers right-wing corporate libertarianism is the way we would describe it. And by that, it means the prosperity that Americans for Prosperity wants to show up for is the prosperity of the big companies and corporations, not for the people who are working for them or with them. And so they've done things like they oppose climate change. Maybe just that. They oppose the idea of climate change. They oppose climate change regulations to try to do anything about climate change. They are against Medicaid expansion. And that's something else that I've talked about before, but I'll mention it again. We have to think about, I talked about this last week, who our incumbent shows up for. When we have a poverty rate higher than the state average in this entire district, and again, 1 in 4 people in poverty in Meadville. 70% of the billing at Meadville Medical Center is for people on Medicaid or medical assistance. This is a high-need district. Opposing Medicaid expansion, which Roy has done over and over again, is not showing up for your constituents. But the Americans for Prosperity that rate Brad 100% are opposed to Medicaid expansion. They favor limiting collective bargaining, which is a nice way of saying they're anti-union. They don't believe in the power of the people to show up together to fight against the big Goliaths that would make the rules. And again, I say that legislator ought to be over here standing up against the people that are hurting the people. But they're anti-union. They also, in that same breath, believe in right to work designations for states, which is another, it's not right to work, it's right to exploit. And then also the Americans for Prosperity, Americans for Corporate Prosperity, we really need to call it. The Americans for Prosperity have been identified in several different voter suppression schemes. Now, these are all allegations at this point, but there's a consistent pattern of mistakes that have been made, accidental mailings that suggest that Democratic voters aren't registered to vote and give them a deadline after the election, or in one case, giving an address for ballot delivery that's not actually the place they're supposed to go. So the Americans for Prosperity is an anti-democratic, in my opinion, an anti-democratic organization that is working for the right-wing corporate interests of an unregulated, exploitative economy. And that's who Brad's showing up for. He's got 100%. A legislator should be proud to not be backed by Americans for Prosperity. And the last one I want to point out, this is another one that he tried to make a little bit of hay about versus me, is the Firearms Owners Against Crime, which is a state gun advocacy group. And there's 100% rating here, again, also for Brad. And the thing that we need to understand about Firearms Owners Against Brad is that the dude who started it has been identified as too extreme, wait for this, for the NRA. The NRA finds the originator of the Firearms Owners Against Crime group too extreme for them. And no one has ever accused the NRA over the last several decades of being mild-mannered. And so being rated 100% by groups like this doesn't necessarily indicate that you're, again, showing up for the people. And an example there, again, something I talked about last week, is when you have a simple gun sense law that comes forward that's to take the guns away from an individual with protection from abuse order against them. It's not standing up for the people when you vote against that. It's standing up for that 100% rating, and it's standing up for some kind of gun Goliath behind you. So the point here is we can find out very easily who a person shows up for based on their track record. And, I would, encourage people to think about my own track record, talk to people that I work with about who I show up for on a daily basis as a chair of a department and as a committee head for some important groups across the campus, but also thinking about my own endorsements. What does that say about who I'm going to show up for? And so when you're endorsed by a group like the PSEA or a group like the AFL-CIO or a group like AppScuff or a group like Moms Demand Gun Sense, which I am, all of these things, it shows that you stand up, you will show up for the people, for common sense, not anti-gun legislation, but for common sense gun safety, so that we can actually put a dent in gun violence. Not take people's guns away, but think about what kind of regulations can we have that are consistent with the Constitution of the United States and of Pennsylvania that keep people safe. To be backed by the teachers who are working so hard means you're back in education, and the AFL-CIO are the working people. I don't think there could be a clearer contrast between who the incumbent shows up for and who the challenger will show up for if sent to Harrisburg. So we've got 2 weeks in a day. Some of you may have voted already. Thanks for coming in this morning. Even if you voted already, it's always fun to chat a little bit. I'm saying hi to Dan Smith, who's making this same fight happen down in Butler County. If you know folks down there, Dan is going against the twin brother, maybe the slightly more virulent twin brother of Dan Roy and Daryl Metcalf down in Butler County, which is a really important flip. So if you know people that can support Dan at the ballot box, please do. But yeah, we've got 2 weeks to get people registered to vote by the end of the day, to get those mail-in ballots sent in, and to make a plan to vote on November 3rd if you haven't done that already. The big takeaway from today is thinking about not just what the candidates are saying, but how what they're saying indicates who they will be for you and for your neighbors when they're in Harrisburg. One thing I'll always say about the incumbent Brad Roy is he's pretty transparent about who he shows up for. And to me, it shows categorically it's not for us. He's not showing up for the 6th district, and he's certainly not showing up for the little person in this district. And that's what I'll do if I am your state legislator. It's a pretty rainy Monday out there, so there's nothing better to do than make sure you're registered to vote. And I hope your week gets off to a good start. Talk to you all later.